It was this little girl. She was eating her food, and it was like just like little chicken nuggets or something. And she would eat a piece of the chicken nuggets, and then she would just do a little dance. And she was just so joyful when she was eating. And that's what I want for people. I want people to feel happy when they eat. I want it to be a pleasurable, amazing, beautiful sensory experience that is eating. So really getting away from that harmful self-talk that can be happening when we make certain food choices, and really just make eating and make eating joyful.
Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we are coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset. Your health is one of the biggest influencers of the quality and quantity of time that you have. And while there are many aspects of health, our expertise is exercise. Exercise has been proven time and again to not only improve your health, but also increase your longevity and improve your quality of life. But we know that exercise is not the only piece of the puzzle, and that is why we are bringing you a phenomenal guest today, none other than Carly Feldmeier. Carly Feldmeier is a holistic nutritionist and health practitioner passionate about bringing gentleness and compassion to health and wellness coaching. She completed her Master's of Science in Nutrition at National University of Natural Medicine and is ready to serve her community. With a unique nutrition education from a naturopathic institution, Carly focuses on using the healing power of nature in her practice. From clinical and counseling experience to culinary expertise, Carly is prepared and excited to co-actively guide you in your health journey. Carly, thank you for being here and welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Absolutely. So tell us more about how you got into nutrition and what a holistic nutritionist is.
So I got into nutrition based on some health issues I was actually experiencing. I was starting to be physically ill and went to some conventional doctors, and I really didn't have any relief from any of the therapies that they were offering to me. So I sought out a holistic nutritionist and a nurse from a dear friend of mine who suggested that I try something different. And after talking with her a little bit and kind of changing my view of what health was and taking a holistic approach, I really found some success in my own health journey with that. So I knew I had to completely change my career path. I had been studying something different in college and changed my career path and started focusing on nutrition and have been super passionate about it ever since, just because of my success with it. So
very cool.
Yeah, that's kind of how I got into it myself. A holistic nutrition, when I first think of the word holistic, it's basically understanding that health is multifaceted. So understanding that there is a body, mind, and spirit to all of us, and all of those things need nurturing and caring. And also understanding that nutrition can impact all three of those pillars of health, to body, mind, and spirit. So it's kind of that those working together, that health is multifaceted and also nutrition can impact all of those different.
Very neat.
Yeah.
Now, before you went and saw the doctor, were you into health at all? Or were you into nutrition at all? Or was it a total 180 for you?
Total 180.
Wow.
I mean, I was in psychology before, which I love and deeply appreciate, but was not in physical health at all, and really just sat down with this nurse. She kind of changed my life in a lot of ways, and she was like, we need more people in here. And I was sold from that moment on. I was like, I need to do this. So
very cool.
Yeah, it was a complete 180, and everything about my lifestyle changed after that. So
that's awesome.
It was really influential. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's awesome. So you went to the National University of Natural Medicine. That's not something I've ever heard about. So how did you come about this school, and what were you guys studying in school? Was it just what you're practicing now, or were there other things you looked at as well? So tell us about that.
The school's actually super unique and rare education in this country. I happened to stumble upon it. I knew nothing about naturopathic medicine before coming upon this school, but one of my friends actually was going to be a naturopathic doctor, and he was kind of like, Carly, you know, you seem to have, your vision kind of aligns with their philosophy. You should really look into schools like that. And there's only 7 naturopathic schools in the country. So I found one that had a nutrition program, which is even a smaller number, which is like 2 or 3 in the country. And we fell in love with our program. The school is amazing. They have really the basic classes that you would need to be a nutritionist, but then also some really unique, awesome elective courses that have these beautiful healing foods kind of focus on the education. So we learned a lot about healing foods and what that means, and kind of taking a different holistic approach rather than the conventional approach that you would find with dietetics or other conventional nutrition schools.
Sure.
So it had that naturopathic influence on it. So like I like to say, using that healing power of nature to really help people kind of get well. So that was what was really different about my school. It's a really unique education.
Really cool.
great.
Yeah,
Really cool.
totally.
And when you say nutritionist, what does that mean exactly? I mean, you said you're a holistic nutritionist, and you kind of talked to us about what holistic means, kind of the whole body. What does the nutritionist piece mean?
So it's basically understanding how kind of food impacts our body, and in this case, body, mind, and spirit, and understanding kind of what's physiologically happening in our body when we eat different foods, and trying to bring about wellness as best as possible with that healing power, that modality of using food. So really working on how we can shift what they're eating, their food, to bring about health and wellness within the whole body. So that's kind of the nutrition.
Very cool.
To use food.
So you're looking at, you know, what people are eating, how people are eating, and then you are acknowledging that food plays more of a role in somebody's body than just kind of the biological, physiological effects. There's an emotional effect. There's, you know, effect on how somebody's mind is working, how they're perceiving the world, and all that. Is that kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about both the holistic and the nutritionist aspect in one?
Absolutely. I think that's kind of where the topic of food relationship comes in, is it's much more than just the physical aspect of how food kind of affects our body. It's talking a lot about that mental, emotional aspect of how the act and the practice of eating can influence more than just our physical body. That kind of is more far-reaching than holistic nutrition. I feel like there's a lot of education, there's a lot of programs and certifications that you can get with holistic nutrition, and it's unfortunately a topic that isn't talked enough in both, even, you know, things like counselors and also nutritionists. So it's a little more far-reaching, but I think it's a beautiful intersection of nutrition and psychology and health coaching and all of those things put together. So,
well, you know what's really interesting about that I'm picking up is that it's like, okay, if you're just studying nutrition, like when I think nutrition, it's like macros, calories, and, you know, okay, what is a carbohydrate, you know, things like that. Okay. But then there's a whole relationship side. And so then you typically have a completely separate sector with, it's like, okay, you know, how are you thinking about food? You know, do you have some kind of psycho-emotional condition that gives you a weird relationship with food? And then you're saying, well, no, actually those two are very intertwined. It's not like nutrition is over here and your relationship with food is over here. It's like, no. If I'm guessing if you can start to improve one area, that can help you start to improve another area, and they just kind of amplify each other. But you have to acknowledge that there's a relationship there to begin with.
Man, you guys are on top of it. On it. I love it. Absolutely. That's why I think the two should be worked together. Like, I really think that starting with people's food relationship can help them live a healthier lifestyle and maybe approach lifestyle change in a much more sustainable way once they have that solid foundation of food relationship. And I love that you just said all of those things, because people often think of nutrition as just macronutrients or calories. And I feel like that's what like mainstream nutrition kind of pushes down your throat. But honestly, if you kind of look at our health, the health of our country, it's not working. Conventional nutrition isn't working. So that's why this approach is a little bit different, but also very successful, because once people feel like they have that solid foundation of food relationship, and I would love to talk more about what that is, but
Sure.
talking, once they have that solid food relationship, they have that self-love, understanding, compassion for themselves that is really beneficial for their mental health when they approach these lifestyle changes that don't just completely can't like crumble them if they approach a hardship or a bump in the road.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So
Now, before we jump into food relationships, I know that's what we're going to talk mostly about today. Give us some, just so that our listeners can start like having a visual of what it means to work with a holistic nutritionist or what that looks like. Tell us about some of your services or how you apply your holistic nutrition coaching and or training to the general population, someone that might not be educated about it. I know you have a wonderful website, and so I know there's a couple that I even looked at. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about those different offerings you have and different education opportunities that you have.
So I work primarily one-on-one with clients. I absolutely understand the importance of that. So I call it food focused health coaching. So understanding that food is going to be our focus when we work together, but also understanding that, again, health is far reaching and holistic. So we talk a lot about not just food, but other lifestyle choices and kind of coming together and figuring out what works best for you. And it's really client focused. It's really client driven. And I'm here just as a big support system. So that's definitely one of my services. Food relationship coaching is another one of my services. So one-on-one and also group work. I also do personal chefing for people. So batch cooking, and I go to their homes and cook for them. And that's something super awesome to bring in all of the healing foods knowledge I have to be able to kind of come up with meal planning for them too. And then I also do a lot of health workshops and educationals, and people usually love that on a wide variety of topics in the community. So
Very cool.
Yeah.
So when somebody meets with you, are you sitting down one-on-one and then you're going through like their health history and assessment, or are you looking, what kind of things are you looking at with a client when you start giving them advice about kind of what they should be eating, what they shouldn't be eating, and different kind of lifestyle changes to make?
So that's kind of where my approach, I think, is a little bit different than traditional nutrition. Is we again start with that food relationship and focus actually on the opposite of shoulds and shouldn'ts, and focus more so on kind of understanding them as a whole person and the complexities of their current situation, also, what their history is like, definitely. And kind of starting with that foundation of just getting to know each other and what their life is like and where they're at currently. And then going from there and understanding when it's necessary to have a lifestyle choice, if they're ready to do that.
Sure.
And then if not, great. That's cool. We can support each other in different ways. But then, understanding when it's time to move forward and if we need to make decisions, moving forward with their health changes, lifestyle changes, and things like that. But again, really making it client driven and building a relationship together and understanding kind of what their goals are and making it about them and not what I think they should be doing, Well,
what's so interesting about that is when you look at the number of people that like start diets and then stop diets, okay? Like nobody stops a diet because they don't know what to do next. They don't know what foods to cut out. They don't know what they should be eating. So like the shoulds and should nots rather are very much public knowledge. Like people are super aware of it. Every once in a while, people will be unaware of something, but I'm going to say for like 70 to 80% of the should and shouldn'ts, I think for the most part, the general public is relatively aware of that. But to your point, it's like, okay, if people are just getting the shoulds and shouldn'ts, eventually they're still going to run into that roadblock of, well, what's their relationship, even if they're only eating the foods that they should be eating.
Exactly.
So if that fundamental relationship is skewed to begin with, well, then I'm not going to say they're like bound for failure, but it's going to be much more difficult. Exactly. So I like that you're starting with that and just saying, okay, we got to get your relationship different. And then now we can start to do all the different inputs.
Absolutely. That's beautifully said. Very, very beautifully said. And it's so important to acknowledge that we have a culture right now that's very failure based in diet culture. And people feel like when they start these diets, yes, they have the education about it, but if they don't do everything properly, or they don't comply properly, that they're just failures and they just want to give up. And it doesn't work. These diets aren't working for people. And so like, let's dive a little deeper. Why are you approaching a diet? Why do you want to diet?
Yeah.
Let's get to that root cause first. In most cases, it's weight loss, or how, very outward appearance, or they don't feel well about themselves. And it's like, well, let's tackle that first. And diet changes, lifestyle changes can come after that. But you're right. It's starting there, and kind of understanding that the the general public, they're educated. They know.
Sure.
They know. But what are the barriers? And what's going on in your life that's making it difficult for you to make changes if you really want to make changes? So it's really getting to know people better, building a relationship with them, and understanding that, it's okay to do something that is different than what the public is telling you to do, or what the society is telling you. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like this whole conversation is leading to our topic today, so we might as well bring it up. So what is this food relationship? I know in our pre-chat note, or our pre-podcast notes, you're like, so Julie, we're going to talk about the food relationship. I'm like, okay, what is that? So tell us about what do you mean by those three words, and how is this changing people, and how is this changing how you're viewing how other people should be viewing, their relationship with food? Tell us about that.
So food relationship basically is understanding how our belief systems about eating have been shaped over our lives, and then understanding how those belief systems about eating and food have influenced our belief systems about ourselves, and how those are really intimately connected. And so kind of an example of that would be negatively, unfortunately, and something that people struggle with often is relating to how people eat and how they look. So looking at a food and saying, if I eat this, I will gain weight, or I will look differently, or I won't look the way I want to look. Another example of this is how people feel. So if I eat this way, I will feel like a failure, or I'll feel guilty or shameful. It also is related to our morality. So if I eat this food, this food is bad for me, so I am a bad person if I eat this. So it's kind of understanding how those two philosophies intersect, and then working very hard to break that bridge and make eating just eating, and maybe going a step further than that, and making eating joyful for people instead of stress and all of those things. But the work is really bringing awareness to that self-talk, to those belief systems, and then being able to release those negative thoughts and behaviors and feelings that we might have about ourselves that's related to eating. So that's kind of what food relationship is.
That has to be huge for people, because you have to imagine eating's not something you do like once a week. You're doing it multiple times a day, every day. And so if you have some story or some belief, which I'm sure at some level, most, if not all of us do, about, what the food is telling you about ourselves, well, then that story just has to get amplified for people just to the nth degree. When one, they don't realize it's happening, but two, when people are eating so frequently. Exactly. And they don't even have to be overeating, but I mean, if you're eating 3 meals a day, that's 3 times during the day, and before the meal, during the meal, and after the meal, where this story is getting played. Exactly. That has to be really difficult for people to not only to acknowledge at the start, but how do you help people kind of through that? Because, I mean, it's been something that they may have been telling themselves for decades.
Forever. You're totally right. And that's the thing. This work is so deep rooted. And that's why psychology is such an important piece of this, is because we go back and see how those belief systems have been shaped over your life. And that's why it can take a long time, and it can be a lot of work, a lot of personal work for people, is because it is so deep rooted. But and I love what you said, like eating is absolutely primal. It's survival, right? And we do it so often throughout the days. And it's kind of like living with somebody who you have a really toxic relationship with, right? They are harming you in a lot of different ways all day, every day. And it's the same thing. We can have this really negative effect on our mental health. And like you said, it might be totally unconscious, but it can be totally just that story, like you said, feeding through us. And we're constantly in this mental state with this food. So it's really, really impactful for a lot of people to realize. But the first step really with working with people is becoming aware of it, because when it's unconscious, and as somebody who has gone through this and who has struggled with this before, and I feel like that's why I'm so passionate about it,
Sure.
is I was not even aware that I had a negative relationship with my food. So it's starting with that awareness, really. Mm-hmm.
So as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about, maybe like a yo-yo dieter, or, the I start and stop things, but I also, as we were talking, I was thinking about the people that are really good at it too. Like the people that have these regimented rules, and like, it's almost like an ego boost, because they can do it and they never have to stop. And it's like, they're a machine. So I can see how this could apply. And so maybe these machine people, like, they might not reach out as quickly because they don't feel like as much of a failure. But this might be a silly question, but I think it would be interesting to hear your response. Why is it so bad to live like this? Like, why is it so bad to start and stop and try new things? Or why is it so bad to be like this machine on like, this is how many carbs I eat, this is how many fats I eat, and this is protein. And if, I'm really good at following through with it, they have like the determination and or the will of like, whatever. So why is it so bad to have this interesting relationship with food? And why is it so important that we're breaking it?
I think it's important to ask, why are you so regimented with your food choice, or why are you so strict with yourself, and what is that impact having on you? So if you're somebody who has a really regimented diet and it's working for you and you feel great and it brings joy to your life, amazing. I'm not asking you to change a single thing, but I would challenge those people with that really regimented lifestyle and say, why do you have this regimented lifestyle? Are you feeling like this is really nourishing for you? In most cases, it brings a lot of stress to people's life to feel like, if I don't go to the gym, every single day, then I am a bad person, or all of these belief systems. It's really important to kind of look at those and make sure that your intention is to nourish yourself and you feel really good about it. So if that's not happening, even though the lifestyle choices they're making might seem healthy, quote unquote, it might actually be having a negative impact on your mental health or even your physical health if it's really stressful. Mm-hmm. So in all cases, I'm definitely not saying break that bridge, but it's totally fair to kind of challenge them and make sure that they're doing it for the right reasons.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So as we're talking about this food relationship, what should the food relationship be like? Because we see the problems.
Yeah.
But what is, and I'm sure it's less common for you to even interact with someone that you're like, wow, that person has a baller food relationship.
Totally.
So what are you trying to help clients get to? Like, what is the end result? Because it seems like if it's so personalized, it must be different for people, but there must be some commonality.
Absolutely. So when I share this information with people and they ask that, I always tell them about this little interaction I had at a restaurant with a young little girl, and she inspired me, and I was like, this is what I'm trying to do. It was this little girl, she was eating her food, and it was like just like little chicken nuggets or something, and she would eat a piece of the chicken nuggets and then she would just do a little dance. And she was just so joyful when she was eating. And that's what I want for people. I want people to feel happy when they eat. I want it to be a pleasurable, amazing, beautiful sensory experience that is eating. So really getting away from that harmful self-talk that can be happening when we make certain food choices, and really just make eating and make eating joyful. And that's why I use mindful eating too with this coaching too, because it helps people connect with how they're eating instead of what they're eating, and making that a really nourishing practice. So kind of giving them the tools to focus on how they eat and making that kind of their lifestyle change instead of what they eat. And really just kind of, like I said before, kind of cutting that connection between, judging ourselves with our food choice. So that's kind of the end goal, is bringing joy back to eating.
That's really interesting because, when you think about all the different settings in which we eat in our life, okay, rarely I'm hard pressed to think of one, like, unless you're kind of at home by yourself, where it's like appropriate. And again, I'm using air quotes for this, but appropriate in the context of that setting to be really joyful while you're eating. You can eat really good food, but there's always like rules around eating. You go to a nice restaurant, you have to have certain clothes on. You go to, you go anywhere out to eat, there's a certain demeanor that you have to have while you're eating. And unless you're, like you're saying, like a little kid and you don't realize all that, it's almost like socially unacceptable to, at least out in public, it be super expressive about just the joy of eating. So that's really interesting. It's really interesting.
I love that because it speaks to kind of how society views this practice, right? And so many people are afraid when they go out in public and they eat around their friends because they're supposed to eat certain ways, or they will be judged if they get that ice cream or whatever. I mean, geez, as a nutritionist, I mean, people like stare at what I eat all the time. Okay. But it's basically, yeah.
I thought you were a holistic nutritionist.
Hey, you're not supposed to, you eat ice cream? Are you serious? But it just kind of speaks to that. Like, there's these societal norms about what we're supposed to eat, how we're supposed to eat. And if you break those, then you're suddenly strange or you're suddenly different. And so a lot of people are afraid. That's a really scary step for people, to step outside of their homes and feel comfortable making a food choice that others might judge them for. So that absolutely can be scary, but kind of tackling that is, when I work with people, I challenge them to change the way that they talk about food in front of other people. So if somebody approaches them and maybe says something about their food choice or whatever, and it's judgmental, which a lot of people do, not in a harmful way, but it's just part of our language and our culture, is to challenge them and say, you know what? I love this food. This food is delicious and tasty, and it's going to nourish my body. And I'm just excited. It's amazing. I love it so much. So kind of challenging people to change the language about it is
That's cool.
Yeah, totally.
As you're changing people's, I always tell my clients, like, the way you talk about stuff is the way you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I always tell my clients, think about exercise differently. Let's talk about it differently. We're not here to smash things and go crazy, and you're here to exercise to be the healthiest version of you, and whatever that means for today. But as you start educating and trying to help your clients think about and talk about food in this more pleasurable way, like, let's bring joy to this, what actionable or behavioral changes do you commonly see? Even though you're focusing on, hey, do the things that you love or eat the foods that you love, what changes are you seeing with your clients when they're doing that?
So, like I said before, an important tool that I teach them is the mindful eating. So really connecting with this beautiful, amazing, awesome sensory experience that is eating, and really focusing on being grateful and being present in the eating experience, and having that being the change, and kind of seeing how that can transform how they eat instead of what they eat. So having them eat slower, and having them bless their food, and having them be grateful for it and enjoy it and things like that. That's kind of the biggest change that I'm looking for when I work with people, is that they can enjoy it and they can feel good about how they're eating. So not really necessarily focusing on changing what they eat yet. If that's something, trust me, I'm a nutritionist. I studied how food can amazingly impact and heal the body. And there's absolutely a place for that. But once we get that kind of solid foundation for mental health and that solid relationship with food, we can approach things like what you're eating and changes in what you're eating after that. But the biggest change I'm looking for is how they eat, and going from there and seeing if any more changes after that are warranted, if they're ready for it, if they want that, if they're willing to do it, and kind of going from that point. So,
do you find that people tend to want more changes than that? I mean, and because I think that can be very powerful, but in your experience so far, what have you found? Do you find that, like, all right, once people get the ball rolling with this, that they're like, now they're really ready to make all the other changes?
Great question. I think it's different for everybody. I think a common misconception with this work is that when people get comfortable with their food relationship, that they're just going to eat Oreos and Cheetos for every single meal. Like they're just going to go nuts.
Right.
And that might be a part of it. Like you might go nuts, first off and say, oh my gosh, I'm allowed to eat all these foods that I love. But that's not the change that I'm seeing long-term for people.
Interesting.
People tend to want to nourish their bodies. And especially with that mindful eating tool, they realize when maybe foods aren't serving them or they don't feel well with certain foods or something like that. And that can be motivating once we tap into that too. From personal experience, I had a really nasty food relationship, and I've been doing a lot of work going through this training myself and understanding that I actually want to nourish myself, and it's coming from a place that is really caring for myself personally instead of wanting to change something about how I look. So once people get to that point where they're like, I want to make changes because I know that this is going to be wonderful for my body, or I feel like I need to, it's much more, it's motivating in a different way. And that's been really successful for people. So yeah, people want to make changes after that too, I found.
Yeah. I feel like, what you brought up, I thought, I think that would happen, like as soon as you give permission to people, like, let's stop making Oreos the worst thing on the planet because you love them. I could see people going like, okay, finally, someone says I can do it, so then you go crazy. Totally. But it's almost like without the rule there, it becomes less appealing. It's like that rule that makes you feel like I'm a failure after I have my Oreo fix is the thing that draws you back to the Oreos. Totally. So it's almost like if you always had the permission to do it, it's like, okay, well, when you feel like it, do it. Yeah. But that makes it so you don't have to splurge as much.
Exactly. 100%.
So it's really interesting.
It is an interesting thing. And I think that's a big misconception about this. And that's what kind of turns people off sometimes or draws people away, is they're like, I don't want to just eat, or like that doesn't sound good. But it's like, great, if that doesn't sound good, you don't have to do that. You know what I mean? But it's crazy once you approach eating in a different way and your belief system changes. Those Oreos are going to do a different thing in your body. If you believe that those Oreos are going to be nasty for you and they're going to tear up your insides, it can actually have a physiological effect on your body. But once you have a belief system, if you're sitting in front of an Oreo and you're like, I want this, I'm going to have this, and you just tell yourself and you believe this food is going to nourish me, it's going to do something completely different in your body. Like, this is researched stuff here. You know what I mean? So kind of telling people that is really interesting, and people tend to love that they have more their food choice is a little more free. Yeah. It's interesting.
What I really like about the approach is it seems like the whole baseline premise that you're coming from is people want to be healthy and people's bodies want to be nourished. But it's not necessarily, it's a matter of getting rid of the story that was in some way, shape, or form nourishing them before, getting rid of that and putting a new story in where now they can seek out, whether it's healthier foods or just a healthier relationship with food. They can seek that out because of this new story that's in place. And you're just letting their body kind of do its thing of getting the foods that it wants, getting the foods that will, like you're saying, bring them joy, but ultimately allowing them to be nourished and allowing them to be healthy without the stigma of everything else, all the weight of everything else that they were carrying around.
Absolutely. And that's the coolest thing about this is we're not changing a lot. We're not asking a lot from people to change a lot of the lifestyle. What we're asking is for their mindset to kind of be different and be more loving and caring and compassionate towards themselves, which tends to be received well by other people and must be easier for them in most cases, so that they can feel like they have, themselves to rely on and that they care about themselves deeply. So I think that's kind of what makes it different, is understanding that what makes this approach different is that understanding that belief system, that healthy relationship that we can have with food can be, dare I say, better than any diet kind of out there. Yeah. So that's what makes it different.
Do you have to do a lot of challenging your clients on their rules that they've given themselves? Because I'm envisioning, we don't do nutrition or dietetics here or any kind of food counseling, but it's always a topic that clients come in talking about, and you quickly learn what rules they have in their mind on what is healthy, what is not healthy, whether that's, you can't have butter, you gotta eat low fat, or if it's, I gotta eat high fat, or I gotta have high protein, or I gotta be vegan, so you hear all the perspectives, and I would imagine that it's a little bit of a process to try to maybe change that. What is that like for you as a coach, and what is that like for individuals going through that? Like, is that another thing that's important that is broken? That they're not viewing like, my rules are the rules, and I'll be mindful and joyful, but only if I eat in the rules.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up, because oh my goodness, these diet ideas that people have are absolutely need to be challenged, because I went through my grad program. It was an accelerated program. It was a year long, and I swear halfway through, stuff changed. That's what it can be so powerful when you explain to people, is that diet change, like what is healthy for people changes. The research changes. The fad diets change. I mean, everything changes. And I used to be a science buff going into grad school, and I used to be so research focused. And then I realized a lot of the research is biased. How they approach things are biased. They have an idea of what they want to find. So when they do their research, they find it. And that's what guides healthy eating. So it's just, all of this stuff is so variable and changes so regularly. So I do challenge people's belief systems, and I do remind them that in 6 months, eggs will be healthy for you again, or keto is going to go out of style really quickly. And so it makes them feel a little bit better, because they're not using those external voices to guide what they're eating. They're going to be using their internal voices, which is ancient. Our body's wisdom is ancient, and it's much wiser than the latest research about macronutrients or the diet. So definitely challenging is it can be hard for people to break down those belief systems, for sure.
Yeah. And I think also we get so involved in other people's stories. Like, I'll have a client come in like, so have you heard about the diet? My best friend tried it. I'm going to try it. And I'm like, okay, well, you just tried something new last week. And like, it gets it gets tiring, especially being like the third party that's just listening, because we're not credentialed to give advice. So we're like, the only advice I can give is like, so it sounds like, you just switched last week, Totally. But I think those anecdotal stories that are always like hashtag Transformation Tuesday or inspirational, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, they're not that inspirational because they're not working for anyone else but you.
Exactly.
And so I think that in nutrition, and I mean, also in exercise, that's a big problem too. It's like not only the beliefs we put on ourselves, but what we see other people doing is like
exactly
really impactful on what we believe.
Absolutely. And then taking kind of those stories and then having them be our truths is really where it gets sticky. And then spreading that misinformation to other people, it just contributes to this unfortunately this diet culture that we have, and this these weird, strange belief systems and these fad diets that we have now. Those conversations go a long way, and even just being a third person listening in, they can tell their friends and their family or whatever about what they heard, and then suddenly that's what they're going to do now, or they're going to try it or whatever. So it's a big monster to kind of tackle, is the conversation, the language we have.
So it sounds like there's almost like when people start working with you, definitely the big thing is, listening to themselves. You try to help them listen to themselves. But it seems like another layer that you could add with your nutrition training is advising more on the content of their food. Like, what should you be eating? How should you, like that piece. So how do you blend that? If you're telling your client to listen to themselves, but then you have all this training in like what they should actually be eating or what they could be eating, how do you blend that and figure out what this one individual will be eating?
Yeah. So I think when you start listening to your body, you start realizing, number one, how nutrition and food is absolutely individualistic. What is going to feel good for you is not going to feel good for me in most cases. So when we get people in touch with what their body is telling them, it naturally happens that they understand what foods aren't working for them anymore. I have a health issue that I'm dealing with right now too. And when I had a solid relationship with food and I was eating whatever, and then I realized, oh my gosh, these foods aren't working for me anymore. And how am I going to approach that? So people often can tap into what's going on in my body. Something's not working. This isn't working, or I need to change what kind of food I'm eating because I don't feel well. That can really guide them in a way that I can't. Like an outside perspective, I can't tell you what your body is going to feel when you eat certain foods. So when we kind of have this approach of just cutting out everything and then just figuring it out from there, or just forever cutting things out, it's not really giving their body, the credit that it can kind of guide them in most cases. So that's kind of how I guide people on what they're eating to, is really pay attention to what your body is telling you. And in most cases, it will kind of lead you right.
How do you sift through potential like sugar addiction or things like that, where like cutting it out may feel for a period of time like way worse than continuously having it in? Because I'd have to imagine that if somebody's like, oh, well, I'm just going to do what feels good, well, they keep getting this hit of sugar throughout their day, and they're like, oh, well, that keeps me going. Every time I cut that out, I feel awful. How do you talk to them about, like, yeah, for a little bit, you're going to have to go against kind of what used to make you feel good in order to kind of allow your body to actually feel great and healthy?
Totally. That's a great question. I think it's really kind of being aware of maybe other things that might be going on in their body. If somebody is eating in a certain way that they're coming to me for some reason, I'm thinking that something isn't going to be feeling right. And maybe talking about other symptoms that aren't physical. Maybe they're feeling really sluggish or depressed or something like that, but they feel physically well. Well, okay, like let's get in touch with all of those kind of sensations and feelings that might be going on that might not feel good for you, that might not be physical at all. So that's definitely a tricky one, but I think that if you're coming to me and you're understanding that something is different and needing a change, then we can connect with something that's going on that is kind of just not feeling right to you, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, anything like that. We can kind of come to something, but again, it very well might not be the sugar.
Sure.
It very well could be some food. It could be a situation, a life situation that's going on. And that's kind of where that holistic piece comes into, is basically letting people know that they have agency over what they can change, what they want to change. And if they are not ready, willing, and able to give up that sugar, then I can't make you give it up. And it might not be that. So it's kind of playing games with people and understanding, okay, what's working, what's not. Let's try different things. And what are you ready, willing, and able to change and hopefully see some better result from? So it's playing around with it, really.
Yeah. I bet one thing you have to play around with a lot of is scheduling.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have very strict work schedules, which means it's like, okay, well, you have an hour right now to eat lunch, whether you're hungry or not.
Totally.
And an hour ago when you were starving, like, you weren't allowed to eat a snack.
Yeah.
How does that impact people, or how do you work around with that? Is it, again, just playing with things, figuring out what's going to work? Because I know, like, Charlie and I are like that, where it's like, from 2 to 3 p.m. we always eat lunch. And, luckily we're self-employed, so if I want a snack, I go get a snack.
Yeah.
But, I would assume not everyone's in our shoes where they're able to do that. So what are some things that you've found with that, or is that a common issue?
I think it's absolutely an issue. When we talk about especially scheduled meal times, that's one thing that pulls us away from our body's internal cues to tell us when it's hungry, or to feed ourselves, or to tell us when we're full and things like that. So scheduled meal times, like we have breakfast at 8 a.m. or we have lunch at 2 to 3, we're kind of not letting our body guide when we eat. So unfortunately, there are work environments and situations where people can't just eat whenever they want, and that's a shame. But I definitely tell people to eat when they're hungry and stop when they're full. That's the whole mindfulness thing. And how that works into a busy work schedule is just doing the best that you can. So when you do have time to eat, whether it's 15 minutes or an hour, making sure that you chew slowly and you enjoy it and you're present and all of that, and you're, preparing yourself for the food and all of that, and just doing the best that you can is like the most important piece. Is everybody can't be, have flexible schedules. Everybody can't, be on their own time all the time, but just really telling them that you're doing the best you can. And with these tools, make it applicable for you. I don't know what your life is completely like. And as much as we'd like an ideal situation, that's just not the case for everybody. So just doing the best that they can in those situations.
Now, what about like distractions while people are eating? Because yes, busy lifestyles, people are either eating on the go or they're, that's when they're answering emails. But also, what about like conversing while you're eating? Is that has seemed to be as I'm going to assume the other stuff is detrimental. So I'm going to say as detrimental as, scrolling through your Facebook feed or something like that while you're eating. Does it bring you away from being present with your food? And can you speak to that a little bit?
Definitely. So this is a great topic because we're so disconnected in our current society. We have things like social media where we're constantly on them, scrolling through, and every free moment we get, we're on it. So that definitely applies to mealtime. And I think conversing with people and sharing a meal with your friends or family or whoever is much different than scrolling through Facebook. When you're sitting and having a meal with friends, you're eating slowly, you're talking, you're laughing, you're having a good time. And I think that eating slowly and being engaged in a conversation is different than mindlessly eating when you're scrolling through Facebook. You're not talking, to anybody. You're distracted. And what happens when we're distracted, we oftentimes blow past our fullness cues. And then you're like, holy smokes, I just finished this whole plate and I am super full and I had no idea. But usually when you're talking with friends, you take a bite and then you talk a little bit and then you take a bite and you talk a little bit. And that gives our body the time it needs to tell us when it's full. So I always encourage people to share meals with friends and family and to enjoy that time together and eat slow and to talk about how amazing the food is and smell it and I think you can really be present in that moment, but definitely tell people as best as they can to step away from the computer, step away from the TV, and just kind of eat in the moment and appreciate that moment. So
very cool.
A little different. Yeah.
I could see how just by thinking about, you said things like having gratitude for your food or enjoying the food will really change so many things that people struggle with, like the portion control or the fullness cues. Like, when do we know we're done? Well, clearly when my smoothie's done. Like, that's when I'm done. It doesn't matter when I'm, actually full or when my body's saying, that's enough. There's 3 bites left, so I'll just have it. So that's really interesting that you bring that up. And I think just that mindful piece changes a lot of the issues that people are already having and experiencing.
Absolutely. I think that speaks to like the most common thing that I've heard when it comes to mindful eating is when I was younger, my parents told me you can't get up until you finish your plate. That is like
interesting.
The such a huge one. And
you gotta be part of the Clean Plate Club.
Yeah, exactly. Or you're not getting up until you're not going, you're going to bed right now if you don't finish all your food. And it's kind of understanding, and that's another food relationship piece, is understanding how those belief systems have been formed and then being like, well, maybe we have this mentality of I need to finish everything or I'm just going to, ravenously eat. That's where it might be coming from is kind of those belief systems that have been implemented over time.
Yeah,
so
very interesting.
Yeah.
So Carly, let's say our listeners are, because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking this myself is like, wow, I'm often very disconnected when I'm eating. Okay. And it's not like I'm scrolling through, but as Julie know, and anybody who's seen me eat know, I tend to eat really fast. So if our listeners are like me at all, or they know somebody like me who maybe they're, or they just feel like maybe they don't eat fast, but their relationship with food is not what they would like. What are some things that they can start to do on their own to start to change that relationship and change how they view food and the role that food plays in their life?
Definitely. That's a loaded one. I guess when it comes to, so I'll talk a little bit about the fast and disconnected part first. I think kind of just focusing on slow and attentive is kind of how I like to tell people to eat. So if you're noticing things are going fast, or you're noticing that you are not present during the eating experience at all, is just giving yourself the moment. And a lot of people have busy lives and busy schedules and craziness going on in their life. But if you can just give yourself that 15 minutes to just say, I'm going to make this about me, and I'm going to think about all this amazing flavors and all these amazing textures that are in this food, that's your moment. So just basically giving yourself that time is a big thing that I tell people. When it comes to food relationship, I think the most important place to start is just being aware. How do you feel around meal times? What's going on in your head? What are you thinking about? How do you talk to yourself? Those are like some really big questions that kind of bring upon this awareness piece that's so important with food relationship. So kind of being curious about it, and then maybe trying to understand that you're an amazing person and you're doing the best that you can, and just to be a little more gentler on yourself. So starting with that awareness, and then hopefully bringing in a little more gentleness is the best that we can do, so starting kind of there.
Definitely. Well, Carly, that is just awesome advice for everybody who's listening, myself included. And so you've been laying down some knowledge bombs about, what we can do to help ourselves be healthier. But I'm curious, what do you do to kind of promote your own health throughout your day and week?
So that's a good thing. I definitely, that's a good thing to ask. I do my best, and I try to just always tell myself that I'm doing my best. And, when we think about healthy lifestyles, we kind of think about, well, okay, are you working out? Are you eating healthy? Are you sleeping enough? And all of these things. And it can feel really overwhelming. So we live really busy lives. I do as well. And I try to just, number one, be okay with whatever I can do with myself. So kind of always reminding myself that I'm doing the best I can. I'm so big on self-care, so big on it. I love baths. I love time to relax. I love de-stressing and stretching and reading, and just really giving myself me time every single day, trying to find something that I can do that I can just really de-stress and relax. So I love doing that. I love cooking, and cooking with my partner, cooking with friends and family, having people over, and just really enjoying company and enjoying time with myself. And those are kind of the big things that I try to make happen like every single day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Totally.
Very cool. Now, Carly, let's say somebody's listening to this and they're like, I need to get in touch with Carly because they feel like their relationship with food is not what they'd want it to be. How can people connect with you?
I have a website that I love to direct people to. It has all my services and some really great information, blog and stuff like that. So my website is nurturingthroughnature.org. I also have a Facebook page, Nurturing Through Nature, and also an Instagram with those two. So if you want to connect on social media, shoot me an email or check out my website. Those are the big areas.
Right on. We will definitely link to all of those in the show notes.
And I know you have some really good videos on your website, because I was on there. I was like, that girl's rocking. I love it. Let's hear more from her.
Yeah, right on.
I love it.
Now, Carly, the question that we like to wrap up for all of our guests is, what is your definition of health?
Ooh. I think my definition of health is feeling well in all of those kind of aspects. So not really focusing on just one pillar of health, maybe not just physical, maybe not just mental, emotional, or maybe not just physical, but feeling balanced in kind of all three of those aspects, and feeling like you're doing what you can in all of those three, and just feeling well, mind, body, and spirit.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah,
right on.
it's a hard one.
I know.
It's a tough question.
No, that was great.
Yeah.
That was great.
We get the answers across the spectrum. So it's fun to hear everyone's different perspectives. But that was a nice one.
Yeah. No, thank you. Absolutely.
You.
Well, Carly, thank you so much for sharing with us today. It was so cool hearing this different side of food that we rarely ever hear. And, something that you said kind of early on in the interview that really stuck with me was the idea that when people have a story about food, it's like they have a different person inside of them that's being judgmental, that's telling them that they can and can't do things. And, if we subscribe to this idea that, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, they're spending a lot of time with that person.
Totally.
And that can be, if it's a good person, awesome. But if it's somebody that's like judgmental and is talking negative about you, like if that was an external person, you would cut off that relationship. And so you're helping people cut off that relationship with the person they have inside there. And that's really cool. It's really valuable. So thank you for doing that work and sharing it with us.
Thank you for that wrap up.
That was a cool one. I was like, wow, one of the people you spend a lot of time with is yourself. So your self-talk, that's good.
That's amazing. Charlie. Thank you for putting it into a nice little package.
That's why I hang out with you, Charlie. Keep you around.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. It was so fun having a conversation with you guys about it.
Our pleasure. Absolutely. And for our listeners, who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that needs to find out more about what Carly is doing? Share this episode with them so they can hear of how important it is to get your relationship with food squared away, and they can get on that path of improving their relationship with food. And while you're online, if you wouldn't mind, head on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. Reason being, once people start looking for information on exercise, on nutrition, on health in general, and they're searching through podcasts, it helps ours come up. So if you found value in this, please, please, please leave us a rating, leave us a review. It means the world to us. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.